Good morning and thanks for watching All Things Heart. I'm Alexis Del Cid. Right now, we're working hard to bring you all new episodes of Season 7. Until then, we'll be airing Encore presentations. So sit back and relax and enjoy this Encore presentation of All Things Heart.
My mom has always said that a doctor who is worth their weight is somebody who can say, I don't know, or this isn't my area, so I'm going to bring somebody in who does know.
And her mom really did know best how multiple experts here at the health system work together to help Ann Bruer through her journey to a healthier heart. Good morning. Welcome back to All Things Heart. I'm Angie Racono in for Alexis Del Cid. I'm a new face for most of you. I recently joined the team here from KCTV5, and I'm thrilled to be part of the health system's medical news network. Now to today's guest. Ann Bruer knows how important it is to trust your instincts. She's been a cardiology patient since she was a baby. When she began experiencing new heart symptoms, she drove to the nearest emergency department and was frightened when those doctors told her she needed a heart transplant. When she got to her team here at the health system, she learned the fix was far less invasive.
I went to one state because you just took a wrong turn.
Ann Bruer and her parents, Patty and Bob, enjoy spending time together every single day.
Quite amazing. We drink coffee in the mornings and talk about mostly whatever Dad wants to talk about.
But when Bob and Patty start recounting their daughter's health journey,
the baffle was what was put in when she was a baby.
It's clear that they know more medical lingo than any parents would ever want to know.
That her superior vena cava was completely occluded. The lead went through her vena cava, and they had to withdraw the lead.
The past 51 years since the day Ann was born have been one long crash course in cardiology. A journey so remarkable that when Ann was a toddler, her story was featured in their hometown newspaper in Springfield, Missouri.
I was diagnosed with transposition of the great arteries.
This was all totally new stuff to us.
Ann underwent her first of multiple procedures and surgeries when she was just a baby.
We didn't know if she was even going to survive the first surgery that she had.
Ann not only survived, she thrived, marking all the childhood milestones any parent could wish for. Graduation, creating her own family, and 18 years ago, when Ann was pregnant with her second baby, she moved to the Kansas City area where her parents had already relocated to be closer to them. She also joined the Adult Congenital Heart Disease Clinic right here at the University of Kansas Health System for her continued care. She didn't know that shortly after she would experience the most alarming health scare of her adult life.
I suddenly felt like I was running a marathon even though I was sitting at the edge of my bed.
She drove herself to the nearest emergency department. It was not affiliated with the health system.
They said that I was in what's called a flutter, which is similar to a fib, and I remember hearing the possibility of a heart transplant. And at that point, I stopped all discussion and said, we need to get a hold of my cardiologist at KU. This doesn't seem like the path I need to be going down right now.
Ann's instincts were correct. Her cardiology team here at the University of Kansas Health System said she did not need a heart transplant. After a series of procedures, they ultimately implanted a cardiac defibrillator in her chest that Ann still has today.
I didn't know that I was so bad until I was better.
She is determined. She has more guts and determination than anybody I've met. She's an amazing girl.
She's grown into an incredible woman, and we're really happy for her.
But Ann gives that credit right back to her team of doctors and, of course, her beloved mom and dad, who've been by her side since the day she was born.
If not for them, I wouldn't be here. So I think that's all that needs to be said.
And we are so happy to have Ann in studio with us today, along with two of her doctors, interventional cardiologist Dr. J.D. Surface, who specializes in adult congenital cardiac disease, and her electrophysiologist, Dr. Rigoberto Ramirez. So thank you everyone for coming. And Ann, let me start with you. How are you feeling today?
really good.
Good. Kind of walk us a little through your journey. I know you've been a cardiology patient since you were a baby. How did you learn about the health system's congenital heart disease clinic?
Well, actually, when I became pregnant with my second child, I knew that I needed to get a cardiologist locally because I was a new person to Kansas City, so I was directed to come to KU and started working with a doctor who's since retired, and just became a part of that community, I guess. I got a folder that says, welcome to the, I think it was like a heart failure group or something like that. So my doctor and I talked about maybe that's not exactly the message you want to give, because heart failure is not necessarily that it's failing, it's just struggling.
Right, and that you just need more support. So Dr. Surface, let me ask you this. Are all of your patients, are they similar to Ann, where they're like pediatric patients from birth and then you take over their care, or do you have some patients who were diagnosed as adults?
You know, that's a great question. And so the answer is yes to both. So many of my patients are patients just like you, Ann, who were diagnosed in childhood and then eventually become adults and develop, you know, unique issues that are unique to the adult population that you don't necessarily run into in childhood. But there are lots of patients who are not diagnosed with congenital heart disease until later in adulthood, and so I certainly see plenty of those patients as well.
Okay. Dr. Ramirez, were you familiar with Ann before she went to the ER, or did she come to you post-ER visit? Is that when you met?
Yeah, so Ann actually connected with me post the ER visit. So she was well established with one of my colleagues that was managing her atrial arrhythmias. She had undergone several of those procedures and they had implanted that intracardiac defibrillator. But I got involved as part of management of the intracardiac defibrillator. So with these, as you know, like any machine, you know, the intracardiac defibrillators, some of the parts can degenerate and you can have some issues with those. And so these devices communicate with us regularly, and so they were noticing some issues with that device. It was getting very close to needing her battery changed, and at that point, I'm part of the group of specialists that manages the way that we, you know, manage those malfunctioning leads or those leads that need to be addressed. And so she came in to see me in what they call the complex extraction clinic, and we're able to work through the situation, as you'll hear the story as it progresses. But
yeah. Well, Ann, let's kind of back up. Let's start with that day. I know it's a very scary day, and I can't believe you drove yourself when you have all of this taking place. What was it like when you hear from that hospital, you need a new heart, you're going to need a transplant?
Well, it's always been in the back of my mind that that would be something that I eventually would need, but for sure I was not prepared for that kind of information. I mean, I was in the hospital and immediately called my parents and said, come on over, and they were discussing that, and I just said, yeah, let's not do this right now. Let's figure out, I need to go where they know me, which was KU. And that's what I elected to do. And in fact, I called the hospital myself because they were kind of being slow about doing that. So I just called the Encore number, and actually my cardiologist called me back that night.
Oh wow, so
he happened to be the one on call.
So you were very resourceful.
Yeah.
How long was it before you could get back in here?
I was, they took me by ambulance to KU that night.
Okay, wow. So you were connected really quickly.
Yeah.
So Dr. Ramirez, can you kind of like explain the difference between AFib and A-flutter? Because I know you were saying it felt similar to you.
Sure. From what I understand, the symptoms are very similar, and I was feeling like I was running a marathon, although I was just sitting.
Yeah. So Dr. Ramirez, what is the difference, please?
Yes, so essentially with our congenital population, you know, one of the highest, they are very high risk of developing these arrhythmias, and really arrhythmias from the top or the bottom chambers of the heart. But atrial fibrillation and atrial flutter are two rhythms, arrhythmias that start in the top chambers of the heart. One of them is considered to be a more regular rhythm. That's called the atrial flutter. It's a little circuit that rotates somewhere in between the structures within the heart. And then the other one is a more chaotic rhythm called the atrial fibrillation. And that rhythm, it really involves the top chamber of the heart just having random firing, so there's no real organization to that rhythm. And what happens is that both of these feel the same because they're coming from the top chamber of the heart, and they're both can be very rapid, can be very fast. And so the traditional symptoms for this is shortness of breath, a lot of fatigue, and just, feeling kind of this impending, kind of doom sensation in some patients. And so fortunately, with those rhythms, we do have different, they're managed the same. Okay, so we manage them very similar. It's kind of almost managed as the same entity. You consider blood thinners, anticoagulation to protect patients from stroke, and you have several medications and procedures that you can consider to treat those arrhythmias and get them controlled, all kind of at the end goal to help keep the heart healthy and also relieve symptoms so that we can get patients back to their quality of life.
Yeah, so speaking of like heart health, if she would have come here, let's say she comes into the emergency room and presents, would she have initially been put on a heart transplant list here? Is that kind of where she would have ended up if she was in this system, just with everything that was taking place?
No, I think that's an important question, and the good news is that our transplant team here, and really everywhere that does heart transplant, it's a very thorough, complex, detailed evaluation of every patient that we consider for heart transplant before we would ever contemplate putting someone on a transplant list. And in Anne's case, we discovered that there were several things that we could do to help her shy of a heart transplant, and I'm glad that we did.
Yeah.
Me too.
No, that's wonderful. Dr. Ramirez, I did want to ask you, because I know when you were doing the procedure to change the battery, you found something else. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when Anne presented to me, one of the reasons she came to see me was because she had, one of the leads was having issues. So the lead was not, there's several numbers that we track for these leads, and some of those numbers were starting to fall out of range. What that tells me is that lead needs to be, we need to address that lead and we need to replace it. It so happens that a lot of times if you're not dependent on that lead to provide some support, some pacing support or some type of intervention, you can, and it's close enough to that generator change, you take advantage of using that generator change to also address the lead. But this is a complex situation, so when you have a lead that's in the heart, these wires or these leads are touching the vascular system and they're going through the structures within the heart. Everywhere that it touches the heart, it causes scar. And so that scar, in order to remove a lead or replace it, you have to be able to safely separate it from that scar. And you use specialized tools in order to do that. But in that procedure itself is complex. But when Anne saw me, and she gives credit to that I said I do need some help here, because Anne's situation was complex to begin with from the extraction standpoint, but from her heart perspective and her congenital heart disease and her disorder, she's complex in that as well. And so we have around that period of time when you came in, and we had gotten, there's a doc who had just started these conferences around the city and was, or gotten us re-engaged in those conferences, and I'd been a part of some of those. And so the first thing that came to mind is I got to talk to my congenital specialist, at that point. And so what I did is the next day after I saw you, I went straight to him. We started looking at imaging. We came up with a plan. We're going to present you at this conference. We have this testing that we need to do in order to figure out whether her baffle or that, her congenital, anatomy, if there was going to be other things that we needed to consider before I started putting tools inside the heart and started to, work these leads out. And sure enough, we presented her case, at this conference, and there was all these specialists, the surgeons, the interventional doctors that were weighing in on, how we could approach this. There was all this literature review that we did in the background to be able to take situations like you to be able to say, how can we manage this through a protocol? Dr. Surface was about to come on board, so we were super excited about having him on, and so we were able to actually, weigh and bounce off ideas, even though he wasn't here within the hospital, and talk a little bit through those things. And that's kind of what led to getting you, there's a couple of delays in the process, and I know there was some, when Anne came in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go in and talk to Anne about, moving this out a few more weeks, because I want to wait for Dr. Surface to be here. And I know there's a lot of anxiety there, but she was so she's so appreciative and about the communication, and she really made it easy for us. But ultimately, in the end, we were able to get her in with Dr. Surface, and we were able to address that situation in a very effective, safe way. Over-prepare, but essentially got excellent results.
No, but that's terrific to have that kind of team approach. Now, we do have some images of your heart that we're going to put up here on the screen, and I'm hoping that one of the doctors here, we actually have some video first. We have it up if everybody can take a peek right over there. So, Dr. Surface, can you kind of explain what the thicker, dark section is in her chest there?
Yeah, so maybe I can take you through some of this. I think maybe to start, we should understand Anne's heart just a little bit. So Anne was born with a condition called transposition of the great arteries, where the two arteries off the top of the heart are reversed. And so the right ventricle, which usually pumps to the lungs, instead is being tasked with pumping to the body, and vice versa. The left ventricle, which usually pumps to the body, instead is pumping to the lungs. And she had a life-saving surgery as a child that we call an atrial switch procedure. And that is a complex, sort of origami-like surgery where the surgeon will create what we call baffles, which are tunnels that reroute the blood flow so that the blood that was previously destined for the right ventricle actually gets shunted over to the left ventricle so it can get to the lungs like it's supposed to, and vice versa. Sorry if that doesn't make sense. It gets very complicated, but I think what you can see on this picture up above, if you focus on the one on the left, on the top left is a catheter that is injecting contrast dye into the baffle. And you can see that sort of thin squiggly line that's going diagonally from sort of top left down to the center of the screen. That's one of those pacemaker leads.
Okay.
And the contrast does not make it through that baffle. You can see that it ends in a little beak right there. And what that shows us is that that baffle was totally occluded. It was so full of scar tissue that Dr. Ramirez mentioned that no blood flow was getting through it at all. And Dr. Ramirez had to get those leads out, which is not the easiest thing to do. And so Dr. Ramirez and I did this procedure together. It was a very gratifying procedure because with a lot of work, a lot of elbow grease, Dr. Ramirez was able to remove those leads. But then we still had to deal with the fact that the baffle was totally occluded. And that's where I came in and was able to, in this picture on the right here, that is a balloon that I'm inflating in that baffle to try and open it up again. And eventually what we're able to do is place a stent to keep that baffle open. And that allowed Dr. Ramirez to then replace, now you're seeing some more pictures. So these are just some pictures in the middle of the procedure. Again, some balloons. You can actually see that the leads have been removed at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay.
Yeah. And then if you can keep going, we may get to the end here.
Yeah, I think we actually have some video of what, here we go.
Yeah, there we go. So this is a picture after the stent has been placed, and you can now see that contrast is making it nice and wide open through that baffle all the way into the atrium, which is sort of towards the bottom right of the screen in this picture. And that allowed Dr. Ramirez to then place new pacemaker leads, new ICD leads, excuse me, that Anne needed. So it wound up being a very successful procedure that we couldn't have done without, both of us.
Oh yeah,
certainly.
I mean, obviously a very complex patient that you're dealing with here, with all of the stuff that you guys are doing. Anne, I wanted to ask you, how old were you when you had your first surgery?
28 hours.
28 hours. Wow.
Yeah.
So, did your parents know you were going to have heart problems when you were born? Is that
no, they didn't.
Back then,
yeah, they said that I looked a little bit blue, and so they wanted to check that out a little bit, and that's when the ball started rolling. Of that, it came to pass that that's what I had, and that it was actually, I was born April the 8th, and it was the last snowstorm of the year in Springfield.
Oh my gosh!
So I was driven by ambulance from Springfield to St. Louis, where they did the procedure 28 hours later.
Wow. Amazing. Now, we do have a lot of questions that are coming in, and if you have a question, and you can send it to us here on YouTube, Facebook, and the All Things Heart email, and you can find the links right here on your screen. Now, Anne, you shared with us that you didn't realize how sick you were until that procedure was done. So what did you notice after the procedure? How did things change for you?
I could breathe a lot better.
Wow.
I mean, I just felt more energetic. And prior to it, I just felt like I was very fatigued, I say.
And when you're a mom, sometimes that's just normal.
Right.
Kind of
I mean,
slowly...
I'm getting older,
Yeah.
and I am a mother of 2 active teenage-ish now children, and so I just thought this is par for the course of being an older heart patient. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I attribute it to, just like this is the way it's going to go. And I was sort of resigned to that a little bit, but then I thought, maybe there should be something done.
Now, your dad says that you're one of the most determined people that he knows. And you've gone back to school to become a nurse practitioner, you're a mom, so how do you juggle it all?
Grit. I think, yeah, I've always been somebody who moves forward all the time, and I just want to continue to moving forward, and so I just have to do what I have to do, and that's all. That's
No,
fine.
that makes perfect sense. Now, Dr. Surface, why is it important to have an adult congenital heart disease clinic? So what is the difference between that and just like a regular cardiologist? Because I think for most of us, we're like, why do you need to have that as a separate specialty?
Sure, that's a great question, and the answer is simple. It's that congenital heart disease is a tiny fraction of the broad world of cardiology. And so for most adult cardiologists, what they see day in and day out is the heart disease that you develop over time, that you come upon as an adult. And we're talking about heart attacks and heart failure and heart rhythm problems. But they can be very, very, very unfamiliar with rare problems like Anne's. And as I hope you can see from Anne's situation, is that it requires some very particular expertise. You definitely need people who are specifically familiar with the unique issues that adults with congenital heart disease are faced with that are different in many ways from those with acquired heart disease. And what we have found in the literature is that adults with congenital heart disease really need ongoing, long-term, specialized follow-up care, and those that get it live longer and do better than those that don't.
Wow.
So if any of you watching are patients with congenital heart disease, find your doctor.
Yeah, what a great message. Okay, let's go ahead and let's look at some of these community questions that are starting to come in. Lisa asks, how often will Anne need the surgery to change the battery?
So the defibrillators, typically their battery life right now is between 9 to 12 years.
Oh, wow. Has it always been that long, or was it shorter before? It seems like they're getting longer and longer.
They are getting longer. So it used to be that you'd get 6 to 8 years out of them. Now we're about 9 to probably 13 or 14 years. The more you use it, of course, the more, the shorter that life is. But still, it's usually on average about 8 to 9 years.
Okay, great. Jamie asks, did your experience growing up as a patient make you want to become a nurse practitioner?
I thought about this question a little bit. Yeah. Actually, this was a second career in my life.
Oh,
so
great.
When I was just about the time this all occurred, when I was 40, I decided to change my life course and do advanced practice. And my original goal was to be a physician assistant. And what I found was that the person who did my surgery originally started the first physician assistant program at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. And fast forward, that was kind of what I was going to do. And then I talked to some friends and realized that nurse practitioner, kind of the same a little bit, but I decided to go that route instead. But the impetus certainly was that I wanted to do this because of my history with my physician from 1975 in University of Alabama, who had started his first physician assistant program in the country. And I thought, well, that was a good full circle.
Yes, that is quite a full circle moment. Becca's wanting to know, what does it feel like when the defibrillator shocks your heart?
Not great.
Okay, yeah.
It sort of feels, the first time it happened, I was actually at my family's house in Kimberling City at the lake, and I was walking up a pretty steep hill, and it hit me. And,
oh, wow.
I didn't lose my balance. I actually was holding on to a rail and I was okay, but it was more like literally and physically shocking and mentally shocking, like what just happened. And so it just feels sort of like you've been kicked a little bit in the chest, and then then I felt a lot better immediately,
Oh, wow.
actually.
So
Yeah.
you feel that.
Yeah.
And then we had a final question where someone was asking about traveling and flying. Do you have to take special precautions for that?
No.
Nope.
I
All
don't.
good. Okay. Final thoughts from our guests. We just kind of wanted to get your reaction on what Ann's story teaches us about healthcare when it comes to a situation like hers.
Sure. I mean, I think the most important lesson from my perspective is that teamwork, makes
Right.
the dream work, right?
Yeah.
So, this wouldn't have been possible without Dr. Ramirez and I working together, and without that multidisciplinary conference that you discussed. And in fact, just before this, I was coming from that conference. So we just had that conference where we were discussing patients with complex congenital heart disease, and we discussed not just with folks at KU, but also Children's Mercy Hospital and St. Luke's, and it's a really great conference, and it gets a lot of expertise all in one room where we can learn together and come up with comprehensive plans for complex patients.
Yeah, and Dr. Ramirez, what does her case teach all of us?
Well, I've had the privilege of meeting Ann, and I kind of came about this later with all of her struggles with the arrhythmias, but I mean, it's been a real joy, taking care of her. It's, just sometimes you have these really complex cases that come through, and, you think to yourself, like, how are you going to approach it? What do you do? And there's always somebody out there that can put those pieces together. And if we work together, we're able to do that. And I think I can put my part of the piece together, extracting these leads. Give me those all day, right? I can do those. I know how to do. I know how to do those. I know what tools to use. But let me connect with Dr. Surface, and I think we can expand those procedures, and the complexity of those procedures becomes much more manageable and attainable. And we all look at this and we say, you have to go to these big centers to be able to do these types of procedures. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of here at KU is that we're doing those types of procedures here.
Yeah.
And I think more and more, I think that as we get the right people here, we're going to be able to provide that support to a region that doesn't need to travel to get these. We can do those here.
Sure, and it makes a huge difference when you can get that care close to home. Now, Ann, we want to share something you said about your care team when you first spoke with Alexis.
I definitely think that Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Surface changed the course of my life for the rest of my life.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. So I hate to put everybody on the spot here, but what is that like when you hear that from a patient, where you understand the kind of impact that you've been able to make?
I mean, it's the best part of what we do. Just being able to help people and have that impact on your life is such an honor, and I certainly think of it as a privilege that we get to do that. And I'm so happy that it's made such a big impact for you, Ann.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, and then Dr. Ramirez, what kind of patient was Ann when it came to taking an active role in her own care? Because she's quite the patient. I know we're complimenting you guys, but she's a good patient.
She is. She made my job easy, and I think part of it, her parents nailed it early on. She's a go-getter, and she goes for it. And that it's not just on how she manages her own health and her care there, but it's also in just her career and the things that she's done. So I think she's made it easy for us, and I think that I love that we're doing this story on her, because I think that you're a great example of just what we can do in reaching out and advocating for yourself. And it's been a journey, but it's been a real good one.
Thank you.
Yes.
Me too.
Well, we love sharing all of the incredible stories of the patients and the doctors and everything that they're doing together. But have you ever wondered what your doctor does outside of work?
Now for a secret look into the guardians of healthcare at the University of Kansas Health System. Let's go behind the mask.
Okay, I love this, behind the mask. So Dr. Surface, you have a beautiful family, and then you added the chaos of a puppy, and you told us about it. So we're hoping for a little bit of an update. How are things going with that?
Yes, thank you. So this is my family, my wife Katie, and my three boys, Malcolm, Warren, and Harrison. And then you're right, we did decide to add a little puppy who
is that a golden?
He's a golden doodle.
Aww.
Yeah, he's now almost twice that size, even though it's only been a few weeks.
Wow.
And he's a terror. sure.
I love it. You've got everything so controlled here at the hospital, but then you get that big of amount of chaos. Okay, so now we want to check in with Dr. Ramirez. Oh, look at that. That is such a great photo of your kids.
This is.
Let me ask you this: do your kids think you're cool? Do they realize what you do?
Sometimes they give me that feedback.
Do
sometimes
they?
I'm
That's
pretty
good.
cool to them,
Because sometimes I'm sure you're just dad.
Yeah, it's funny. There for a little bit. My daughter, who's Pilar, she's kind of in the middle there. The little 4-year-old. I would walk in and she goes, "Mom, Rigo's home." She called me by my first name. So I thought it was going to be like a 1-month thing. It ended up being like a couple of years,
Oh my gosh,
I think now
hilarious.
she calls me Poppy. But yeah, they are, I think we get home and they don't understand the complexities of it. But as they're getting older, they're asking more and more questions. And every time I see the 4-year-old run around she's got a little white coat and she's got these little stethoscope, you just kind of see that, they sense it, and they understand it. But it's a lot of fun. 4 kids, real busy, but it's been a blessing.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, thanks so much for taking your time to come in and talk with us today. We really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful episode just to learn more about it. And if you'd like to watch or share one of our episodes, scan the QR code to find a list of all of our shows.